All right, so good afternoon, everyone. We are starting the January 9th edition of the Technical Advisory Committee meeting. Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you for being here. So we'll start with the call to order and I guess the roll call at this point. You want to handle that over the
Gail should be handled.
I got it. I have that for you.
Yep.
Just finishing moving everybody over from attendee to panelist. Okay. Jeff Sims,
present?
Mike Williams,
Here.
Brian McCarthy.
Here.
I believe Jonathan Scott is excused. Melanie Calloway. Michael English.
Present.
Robert Fry. Anna Quinones. Clay Hollis. Gina Evans. Christina Bolinois. Leland Dicus. Marcelo Tavernari. Bob Campbell.
Here.
Jesus Peraza Garcia.
Here.
Rob Wassam. Frank Koffenauer. Laura Bauk.
Here.
Jay Collins.
Present.
Jennifer Malone.
Here.
Nicole Sutton is also excused. Sarah Caper.
Here.
We do have an in-person quorum. Chair, if you would call for a vote of consent for remote participation, please.
Okay, so could I get a motion for a vote of consent? So moved. Jay Collins,
Second, Laura Bow.
a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're not recognize yourself as officially.
Jonathan Scott's here too.
Okay, did you get that? Jonathan Scott's also present.
Yes, thank you. And I am going to ask that everybody make sure that they are speaking up and into the mics on the tables in front of you as much as humanly possible.
Yes, and along with that, when you make a motion or a second, please announce your name. It helps with the recorder and minutes. Okay, with that, the next up is public comment. We have a few members in the audience, but I don't know if any are here to speak. None? Okay, do we have anyone online?
Frank Kokenauer's here, just checking in. I'm not here to make a public comment.
Okay, thank you for attending. We appreciate that. Anybody else that is interested in making a comment? Okay, hearing none, I think we are ready to move on with our first action item. Oh, no, next up is the approval of the minutes. Now, we did not have the December minutes in the agenda packet, so we have them available. We had the November minutes, but not the December joint.
We have them available today, and we can act on them next month if that would be the chair's preference.
I think that's probably the best because I don't know that everybody's had a chance to review them. So they'll be included in the agenda packet next month.
Yes.
Correct? And so we'll just approve December and January's at that time, unless we have any objections to that process, which I doubt we do. If anybody has seen them and has a correction, you can speak up now so they can be updated. I have one correction. I've already done it.
I was at the meeting in person.
Okay. You were or not?
I was.
You were. True. I'm sorry, I wasn't at that meeting. Let the record know that I was, which it did. Okay, anyone else? All right, thank you. All right, so next up is the first topic, which is the FDOT and FTE tentative work program.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can. Yes.
Okay, let me, can you see my screen?
Not yet. Gail or Greg, would you make Suzanne the presenter, please?
He has the ability to present.
Oh, sorry, hold on. let me,
Suzanne, we now see well, we did. Here we go. 5-year work program, fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 28.
okay, I'm gonna apologize ahead of time. Of course, the one time that my dog is gonna bark is right this second. So I apologize. Hold on 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so you guys can see my screen?
We can. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, my name is Suzanne Monk. I work for the Florida Department of Transportation in District 7. I'm the Hillsborough County MPO liaison, and I'm going to talk to you today about the 5-year work program, fiscal year 24 through 28. So the DOT's work program is a 5-year plan that includes all the different types of projects that the department does, which is anything from planning, ITS, highway, right-of-way, construction, rail projects, etc. Currently, we're in the 5 years is fiscal year 23 through 27. At the end of every June 30th, the current year of the work program ends, and the year 2 slides up to be year 1, and we go ahead and add year 5 will be, oh gosh, hold on. There we go. And year 5 will move out to be fiscal year 28. At this time, we're going to talk about most of the projects are going to be funded in fiscal year 28. And these are going to be based on the Florida Transportation Plan goals, statewide programs, and local priorities. Currently, we are in the tentative work program state. As soon as the the FTC and the Florida legislator is going to review this, and then it will go to the governor for review and signature. Once the governor signs off on it, the first year will be included with the budget, and the work program will be considered adopted at that time, and that will be July 1st. So when we're looking at programming different projects, our programming strategy is going to be always to preserve the existing program. So every year we do a work program update cycle. And in that cycle, we're going to go through any of the projects that are already programmed in the current 5 years. We're going to look at different long-range plan estimates, and we're also going to look at the quantities just to make sure everything is good. If something was to come up with say a higher price, we would look at funding that deficit to preserve the existing program. And then second, we would look at funding any next phases of a program. So if we had any designs that needed the construction funded next, we would look at funding those constructions.
That people are putting paper towels and wipes and stuff, and that's what's
Hearing somebody.
I was gonna.
And lastly, we would look at adding any new projects to the work program. When we are programming, we are looking at.
Suzanne, we lost your screen.
Oh no. Okay. That wasn't me. I think someone has to allow me to share it. There we go.
It's back.
Okay. Okay, good. So when we're doing our programming strategies, we're first looking at the MPO priority list. We are also looking at the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance priority list and the Regional Multi-Use Trails priority list, as well as the FDOT and the SIS priorities. Okay, projects in this slideshow are going to be any new projects that are added, newly funded project phases, any deferrals, or any projects of interest. So if I don't mention a project that you've previously heard of or know anything about, so just means there's no changes at this time. This is really just new projects, deferred projects, and projects of interest. So the first project is the number one TPO ask is the TPO transportation planning, and we added planning funds in fiscal year 28. Next up is going to be our transit HART facility construction. We were able to add capital grant to fiscal year 24, 25, and 26. And then again, HART's bus stop capital repairs received a capital grant funding in fiscal year 28. And then the HART bus replacements also received capital grants in fiscal year 28 as well. Next up is our bike ped. Marshall Middle School and Tomlin Middle School were submitted by City of Plant City for sidewalks for a LAP program, and they were approved, and the FDOT is going to be designing and constructing these on behalf of the City of Plant City. Looks like the design is going to be in 24 and the construction is going to be in 27. And then Hillsborough County sidewalk gaps received construction funding in fiscal year 28. And next on the list, some more bike peds. Fowler Avenue from 56th Street to east of I-75. This is a number one City of Temple Terrace ask. We are putting the design in 24 and the construction in 28. And then the next two are City of Tampa LAP projects, Green Artery Segment E and Green Artery Segment D. They are currently working to finish the designs on these projects, and construction will be funded in fiscal year 24. Next up is Complete Streets, Bush Boulevard from Dalmavry to Nebraska. We were able to advance the construction to fiscal year 26, which I believe it was in 27 before. Also, we were able to add design on the North Tampa, North Florida Avenue from Florabraska Palm to MLK. That's part of the Tampa Heights Mobility Plan. And then Lois Avenue from West Cleveland to Boy Scout Boulevard. This was a City of Tampa application that was approved that will be done via LAP. Design they will be doing in fiscal year 26, and construction we added funding in 28. Next up, West Shore Alliance had a big ask. This is, I know a lot of other people too, Boy Scout Boulevard from east of Manhattan to west of Manhattan. We have that currently under design, and we were able to find the funding for construction in 24. Next up is US 301 at Harney Road, Stacy Road, and McIntosh. These will be new traffic signals installed, and construction will be happening in fiscal year 24. And then US 301 at Palm River Road. This was a Hillsborough County SIGP application, County Incentive Grant Program, and we were able to fund this construction in fiscal year 26. Another big project that was a priority, I-75 at Gibsonton Drive. We were able to advance the design into fiscal year 24. And then another Hillsborough County application that was received for the TRIP, the Transportation Regional Incentive Program, was the Big Bend Road from US 41 to Covington Gardens and Simmons Loop to US 301. Construction was added in fiscal year 24 for 13 million, which is a big ask, and we were glad to help out. The next couple ones are going to be technology. So I know some of you are familiar, I'm not sure if all of you are or not, but we have a national electric charging vehicle deployment program in the state of Florida, and two are going to be added in Hillsborough County. So there's going to be capital, I-4 is going to have capital grant in fiscal year 23, and an operational grant in 24, and then the US 41 at State Road 60 is going to be 24 for the capital and then 25 for the operational grant. So those, I just want to say, there is going to be an RFP that's going to go out for a third party to come in and build, install, operate, and maintain these charging deployments. So we're looking forward to bringing you guys some more information on that. And then I-4 truck parking facility, the construction was advanced to fiscal year 25 due to the department receiving the infra grant. So it's a total funding over 5 years of a little over $2 billion. And then this is the breakdown for the different areas that we talked about today. We do like to point out that bike ped does look a little low. Those are strictly bike ped improvement projects. There's no way for us to really break out what's under capacity or anything that we're doing under resurfacing. So public comment has already gone through. January 22nd is the MPO's objections are due. And then spring, the legislative session will review these. And then July 1st, the adoption of the work program will happen and we will have our list of projects for the next 5 years. Just want to thank you guys. I know this can't make public comment right now. However, if you guys have any comments, I can take them at this time. We just like to end every message with remember to walk wise, bike safe, and drive safely. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them at this time.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne. Is there any questions from members on the committee? Yes, Jay.
Thank you. Suzanne, that was a great presentation. Quick question on Plant City and the sidewalks for the schools. I'm assuming that doesn't actually go onto the school district's property, or does it? And I was wondering, did any of the other jurisdictions ask for sidewalk improvements specific to schools?
I want to say that they're not on the school district property. Don't quote me, I can find out that information. I want to say that it's various locations around the schools, and it was submitted, I believe Frank is on the line.
Yes, I'm online. That's correct. None of these are on school property. They just facilitate common routes to schools.
And I don't believe I received anything else for schools and the surrounding jurisdictions. I received different I didn't get any from Hillsborough or Temple Terrace or City of Tampa, I believe, for schools.
And Suzanne, is that unique to do the sidewalk gaps to schools for the district?
No, sometimes we receive them, sometimes we don't. The funding for safe routes to school is very limited. And so sidewalks count in when you apply for transportation alternatives. And so it really just becomes which ones are higher priorities on the MPO priority list.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, just shocking with the letter.
All right, is there anyone online that has any questions or comments? Thanks, Suzanne. I know I was at the ITS meeting when it was presented last week, so I appreciate you kind of expanding a little bit on the electric charging stations, just to provide a little more clarity that they're in the county and so forth. But I'm certainly glad to see that as part of the mix, going forward. So thank you for that.
No problem.
So I don't believe we have any more comments. The next up was I think the letter of the associated factor, which is the road transmitter.
And it's actually the Florida Turnpike Enterprise first.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Gail or Greg, would you make the podium computer the presenter, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Yazzie Fine, and I'm with the Florida Turnpike Enterprise. So, show my screen?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
There we go.
So I have a singular project to present, but bear with me. So again, my name is Yasser Fine, and I'm with the Florida Turnpike Enterprise. Today I'll be presenting our tentative work program from fiscal years 2024 through fiscal year 2028. In Hillsborough County, the Turnpike is proposing to fund $34 million in major projects. So this presentation that I'll give, and I'm just going to give a few speaking points about the Turnpike, just so you know a little bit about us. I know come out here a couple times here and there, but never really have a conversation of who we are. So anytime that we can speak about it, we do. But there's this green document that is attached to your agenda. I'll read it to the first page. So this green document is actually our tentative work program summary, which is the highlights of our projects that are in our work program. If you look through this document, in the main tables, we have one project in Hillsborough County. But my presentation is based off of this document, so whether you read the document or if you listen to the presentation, it should be the same information. Okay, so the Turnpike, there are Turnpike facilities in 6 FDOT districts in 19 counties in Florida. In Hillsborough County, we have the I-4 connector, which is actually between I-4 and the Summit Expressway. We have the Veterans Expressway, and then we have the Suncoast Parkway. It's like a little portion right above the Veterans Spur that is still in Hillsborough County, but that's considered the Suncoast Parkway. So parts of the Turnpike main line have been around since 1957. However, the Turnpike has been open since 2002. The Florida Turnpike Enterprise has been open since 2002. So about 20 years in operation. As one FDOT team, we follow the department's vision and mission as we help meet the state's transportation needs, ensuring value to customers, protecting investors, and managing the Turnpike system in a business-like manner. So 20 years of operation, there's things that change. Certain trends that we've been following that I'd like to present to you all. So Florida's population has gone up 31%. Registered vehicles on the roadways has actually gone up 37%. And then specific to the Turnpike, vehicle miles traveled on the Turnpike system has actually gone up 80%. So to meet these needs, we have to spend money. So how do we spend our money? So the Turnpike primarily receives funding through user tolls and concessions at our service plazas. So first, with that money, we must pay for operations and maintenance costs. So this includes the cost to collect and process toll payments. After that, we must pay off debt on bonds that are issued to construct major projects. It should be noted that due to our high credit rating, the Turnpike has historically benefited from some of the lowest borrowing costs in the toll industry. After that, we pay for renewal and replacement projects. Of course, these are our resurfacing projects or projects where there are reoccurring improvements on the roadways. And then after that, we pay for capital improvements. So those capital improvements include our widening and our interchange projects. But how do we get to paying for our projects? Well, first it's we determine how projects are funded depending on their project type. Projects must demonstrate a transportation need and be prioritized accordingly based on that transportation need. Each year we look at observed traffic data and future projections across the entire Turnpike system. Of course, we take into consideration environmental feasibility and economic feasibility. But of course, the most important thing that we do is we receive stakeholder input throughout the project development process. That's something we take very seriously. So the singular project that I'll be talking about can be found on page 2 of the work program presentation, of the tender work program summary. So this is a resurfacing project of the Veterans Expressway / the Suncoast Parkway, go north, from milepost 1.4 to milepost 17.5. The map also has the illustration on there where it shows where we're resurfacing in the yellow. So this project actually has construction funding in fiscal year 2026, but that's the primary project that's in Hillsborough County. But before we move on from this tentative work program summary, I actually like to talk about some features that we've added to the tentative work program summary to make it more readable. So this first table right here, we actually added this. This is current construction projects that are happening in the current fiscal year. So these projects are either under construction right now or should be under construction in the near future. So this is just letting you know what's going on our facilities now, what you might see out there with our construction crews. But then on page 7, which is the back of the tentative work program summary, there is a table with projects on there that have PD&E design or right-of-way funding phased in the future, but these projects don't have construction funding associated with them. So they were put in a completely separate table in the back. Okay. So just to close out, for more information on all projects in the Turnpike Tentative Work Program, you can visit the FDOT Work Program Public Hearing website. I believe in Suzanne's project, it showed on the final slide for her. And download the District 7 Public Hearing report when it becomes available. So I presented to another MPO before this, and they were also in District 7, but their report wasn't coming through. So whenever the report is available for District 7, I would encourage you to download that to see all our major projects and our minor projects that are included. But with that being said, I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to present to you all. And if there are any questions or concerns, I'll take them now.
Okay, great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions on the presentation? Anyone online? Hang on, give me that. We checked the. Well, I can tell you, I was on it last night on my way back from Tallahassee, so I appreciate that you all completed the extension to Crystal River. I guess it was a couple years ago. I don't know how recent it was, but it's made it a little bit easier for me, so it's very convenient. I don't think I have any questions. I mean, it looks like, I mean, it's interesting that you're looking to widen. I wasn't aware of that. You're widening the portion coming up if it gets funded, but I mean, I don't believe that's controversial in nature, but that's probably the. And I'm assuming the resurfacing is based on projection that the road is currently in good condition. So
yeah, it's we determine, we go out there and we look and determine, oh, by this year we'll need to resurface. So then we resurface, and then the actual PD&E in the back, we are getting ready to kick it off sometime this year. So that's something you can look forward to in the future as we move forward.
okay, very good. Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Vishaka is next. Gail or Greg, will you make Vishaka the presenter, please?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
We can, Vishaka.
And I don't know which screen you're able to see here. I would
Only
like to
we can see your blue desktop.
Are you able to see this screen now with the letter of comments?
We sure can.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, committee members. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. This is Vishaka Shivaraman, TPO staff here, presenting the FDOT's 24 to 28 tentative work program letter of comments. I would just like to bring up this letter. It's already attached in your agenda packet, but I would just like to go over it real quick and explain some of the projects that we would like to bring to attention. First of all, we are greatly thankful to FDOT for the partnership we have had, and would like to appreciate them for some of the safety projects that we have that have been in the work program. As you noticed, the TPOs, the hard projects, which were the maintenance facility and the hard capital improvement program and the bus replacements were all funded. So that was really helpful. The safety projects, which have been funded in the TIP, which are funded in the tentative work program, which were on our Hillsborough TPO's top priority list, were the Bush Boulevard project from Dale Mabry to Nebraska, the Heights Mobility project on Tampa and Florida Avenue, and some of the signals on Boy Scout and Manhattan project. We are also thankful for the US 41 intersection traffic signals at Harney Road, Stacy Road, McIntosh, and the sidewalk projects at Tomlin Middle School and Marshall Middle School in Plant City. These were Plant City requests. So that were, and I also mentioned the other projects, the multimodal projects that were also in the TPO's priority list were the Green Artery segments D and E, and the sidewalk improvements on Alexander Street and Redmond Parkway. These were some of the projects that were part of our priority list and have been incorporated into the work program. However, we would like to mention that the US 41 CSX grade separation project was not in the tentative work program. We have expressed that in the comments as well, and we would like FDOT to include that project. With that, I request the TAC committee members to please approve this letter and submit it to the TPO for board approval.
Okay, thank you, Vishaka.
Thank you.
Do we have any comments on the letter that's presented?
Jack, just question for DOT specifically about the grade separation. So what, I'm presuming something would have to move out. Did that move in? Is there any thought about what that might be? That project moved into the work program, Suzanne?
I'm not really sure. I believe that it's like $100 million for that project, the project estimate. And we just don't have that money. And I think also it's wherever the priority is on the priority list as well. But I can always check with management as well.
No, that's what I presumed, is that something would have to move out for that to move in. And, you know, maybe next year it will be a high enough priority. And it is a big project.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we were talking briefly about it. I brought it up at ITS that, you know, I know it's been a project that's of concern and wanting to move forward. And the letter specific, you know, basically is essentially says we're disappointed. And, you know, should there be something a little stronger to say, can it be reconsidered? You know, not to say it has to be, just to say, you know, is it something that, you know, I don't want to upset the apple cart, and I know that there's finite money and so forth, and I know it's a big project. So it was just an observation. You know, during that meeting, we, you know, suggested that we approved it with the request that they consider whether it could be, you know, evaluated, but that was as far as we went. So that discussion was there. I mean, I'm certainly not directing anyone here, but if there's somebody had that thought and wanted to, you know, I can't make the motion, they certainly are welcome to add language like that. Otherwise, you know, everything else I think is great, you know, that they included the reference. I think it's good that we recognize a lot of the things that we are very glad that they put in. So, but with that, you know, at this point, I guess we look for, do we need a motion to approve the letter, right, Vishaka?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll need a motion to approve, and any discussion if you want to add any language to that approval.
Jonathan Scott, motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve from Jonathan Scott. Do we have a second?
Jay Collins. Jay Collins, second.
Jay Collins. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
We make Connor the presenter, please.
All right, so next up is Connor with the multimodal level of service report.
Does it show my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Oop, give me 1 second. All right, Connor McDonald, TPO staff. I'm here to present the 2022 multimodal level of service report. So I'll start by giving you a purpose of the report. And I know you all have seen this presentation a few months back as a status update. Just as a refresher, the purpose of the report is to record and produce a comprehensive list of major roadways in the TPO major roadway network and their multimodal operating conditions. So a little bit further into the purpose of the report, for external agencies and jurisdictions, the report can be used to evaluate whether standards set in the comprehensive plan have been met. And they also can be used for reports or prioritizing projects within the agency. Internally, we use the MLS report for ETDM reviews, efficient transportation decision-making reviews, and that's an environmental review process that intends to improve, as quoted, intends to improve transportation decision-making in a way that protects the human and natural environments. We also use this for comprehensive plan amendments and other reports and analyses like the state of the system, which you'll hear as a status report a bit later. So as many of you are familiar with the LOS, but I'll give a bit of a background. It was initiated as a concept developed for vehicles as a measure of inconvenience or delay, but expanding that traditional LOS to consider comfort is a relatively new concept. So this LTS researched and explored new methods to quantify safety and comfort for bicyclists and pedestrians. So an LTS 1 would be a separated bike track, and an LTS 4 would be a multi-lane roadway. And that LTS really measures the comfortableness of the user. So a bit of the project history. In 2017, we incorporated the LTS standard. Last year, we used a finer gradient of existing conditions for bicycle and pedestrian LOS, and we applied that to all roads within the county. Last summer, we incorporated those two LTS methodologies into the database and reviewed and updated the transit level of service calculation. And now we're at the MLS report for roadways in the major roadways in the TPO network. So a little bit of contents of the report. There's an introduction, and then we get into the level of service. And this begins with state or FDOT roads, and then we go into Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority roads, Hillsborough County roads, Plant City roads, and City of Tampa roads. There's also an appendices explaining the variables used, the definition of each level of service. We also provide our citation for the FDOT 2020 generalized tables from the quality / level of service report. And we also have a map of roadway network by ownership. So to explain a little bit of the methodology, we've used a corresponding jurisdiction level of service standard guidelines for vehicular level of service, TPO guidelines for bicycle level of service, pedestrian level of service, and transit level of service, all in conjunction with the FDOT quality level of service handbook. And to clarify, not all jurisdictions use the same standards because each jurisdiction has unique goals for their facilities, of course. Give me 1 second. So I wanted to explain the variables used for each level of service. So just a quick overview. For pedestrian and bicycle level of service, as we know, volumes shown in the tables are not the number of pedestrians or bicyclists, rather than the number of vehicles in the outside lanes that's used to calculate bicycle and pedestrian level of service. Unlike vehicle level of service, which is highly dependent on the number of other vehicles on the roadway, PLOS and BLOS are not determined by how many other pedestrians or cyclists use the facility. Rather, it's determined by the presence of sidewalks and bicycle accommodations and the volume of vehicles. The bus portions of the generalized service volume tables are primarily dependent on bus frequency, which is the number of scheduled bus fixed route buses that have a potential to stop in a given segment in the peak direction in a 1 hour time period. So unlike the other level of service, transit level service thresholds are not related to the number of vehicles on the roadway. So the sources of these variables vary, but typically we use data collected from our agencies like the AADT from FDOT, or we have previously contracted with outside consultants to collect data like the traffic counts. So this slide 9, or this slide shows an example of the contents of the level of service report. So we see all those variables, and on the right side listed the vehicle level of service, BLOS, PLOS, and TLOS. So getting towards the end of the presentation, I wanted to provide an example of how the MLOS is used. So for the Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan Capital Improvements element, which is not yet adopted, there are standards listed in this element. So vehicle level service standard is D for all arterials. For PLOS and BLOS, the standard relates to context class. Outside of a C4 and C32, the standard is C in all other areas within the urban service area. For transit level of service, the higher TLOS standard is associated with context class and population. Essentially, the higher context class and density, the higher frequency and LOS would be the standard. I also wanted to note that here that the mobility LOS standards are target and they're non-regulatory. Also, the MLOS report is used in evaluating infrastructure to identify areas for improvement where it can be, or development review or design of projects on various roadways. So the report is available at planhillsborough.org/level-of-service report. And the recommended action is to approve the 2022 MLOS report. And also today, Sarah Caper graciously reached out to me and noted that some of the numbers in the county roads were inaccurate. So we have worked on updating that. We found the error and we'll be updating that as well. So again, the recommended action is to approve the 22 MLS report, and I'll take any comments or discussion as well.
All right, thank you, Connor. Do we have comments on the presentation? Yes, Ron.
I have a question. Hey, this is Brian McCarthy from Temple Terrace. This was before my time, but I was just wondering why Temple Terrace wasn't included. I don't know if you might know that answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I didn't address that. So Temple Terrace is not included because it's the TPO network's major roadway, which is identified by federal mandate. And there are no Temple Terrace owned roads within that TPO major roadway network. So that would be why. But there are roads, state roads within Temple Terrace.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is, I'm noting the volume of the roads and segments that's part of this report. Go ahead, Mike.
Connor, how come bicycle and pedestrian, there's no level service standard outside the urban service area?
I'm not too familiar with that. Are you referring to the Hillsborough County, the slide, the capital improvements element?
Yeah, that's slide specifically, but yes.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar, but I can certainly reach out to someone who is more familiar. I'm not exactly sure what has gone into that update to the mobility section, but I can certainly get back to you on that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mike, I believe that we applied, that the standard was only adopted for inside the urban service area standard. We have applied the level of service to them, but there is no standard set in the mobility section of the comp. That's my recollection of it, but I'll confirm for you.
And is that because our focus is on the urban service area and our focus particularly for bikes and peds, and frankly in the rural service area, we just don't have as many facilities.
And there's less of an expectation.
And less of an expectation and less of a desire to spend capital dollars outside the urban service area.
I would say all of those points.
Okay, all right, that's a good answer. That I appreciate that.
Okay, very good. Connor, this is a very basic question from a non-transportation guy. When you have, I'm looking at the, the roads and I see the ratings, they look like they go from A through F. Is that kind of just a standard rating system where like A is the best and F is the worst?
Excellent question. So it does seem very similar to, like, of course, the American school system, A through F, but the standards are set varying. So of course, I want to be careful how I answer, but not every roadway we would want, not every jurisdiction would want every roadway at an LOSA, because that would mean few cars on a multi-lane roadway. Just for an example, it doesn't necessarily have to be that, but the goal is not always A. So LOSF is a packed roadway, and LOSA would be a non-congested roadway, but the goal isn't always to be non-congested. From what I've researched.
Okay.
But A is better as far as how much volume.
Yeah, generally makes it better. And we want to bring up the Fs, basically.
Yeah, the Fs are the problems, and the E's too. The A's are, to Connor's point, the A's are not problems, but you don't want to spend money there because they're really better than we want. That encourages like speeding and things like that. Sort of naturally some cars down.
No, I'm glad Connor made that explanation, because again, that's not a fluent transportation but stuff, but that makes sense. And the other thing you verified is E is not excellent. E is it's between D and F. So in the range. But all right, thank you for clarifying that. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, it looks like we're looking for a motion to approve the 2022 multimodal level of service.
I'll make that motion.
Bob Campbell makes the motion. Do we have a second?
Jonathan Scott, second.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up is the always look forward to election of officers.
And I'll apologize that I had Mr. Campbell on there. It is in fact Mr. Williams is the vice chair. And Jay. Well, I guess we have them all wrong. Jay is the member at large and Jennifer is not. We should probably handle these one at a time, starting with the chair. If we have,
Usually we look at the.
I'm sorry. the
attendance
attendance.
report.
Yes,
I don't know if there's anything you can do. But
at your discretion.
I don't have a question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's relevant that we consider if there's any.
The three that stood out to me are the Florida Trucking Association, Florida DEP, and the Tampa Bay RPC, as well as T-BARDA. T-BARDA, I think we should wait and see until after the legislature holds its session. May correct that problem for us. But I am planning to reach out to the RPC in particular, and we have a project coming up that will be relevant to the Florida Trucking Association. So to those two, I'm not sure if we've ever really had an active FDEP member.
Not since I've been doing this.
And that may be something that we should look at the bylaws for.
It looks like all of those, including the school district too, they don't even have a person. We used to have a school district person.
Sure.
They've gone through.
That has changed to being a Livable Roadways Committee seat. We swapped with them.
So that one's.
Yes, so that should drop off this
Yes,
list
it will.
for the future years. Okay. What do we pick up from? Do you remember?
I don't know that we picked anybody up.
I know I'm not sure if we got it in the report where we reinvigorated getting the report out. And I know Clay couldn't be here today, but I think it's great that the board is part of this committee. And also, should be part of it.
Yeah, ours on here, we just need to update that as well.
Yeah. But otherwise, I don't see, again, I don't think it's up necessarily if I'm the one that looked and analyzes it, but it looks like attendance is generally pretty consistent. And, please, if you can't make it, ensure you contact and, recognize be professional and, recognize the meeting and if it's excused because you have another engagement, that's fine, and try to get your alternate. But again, I think the committee respects the task we're given with, and, overall, I feel like we, certainly if there's, suggestions from TPO about changes or whatever, let us know. Okay. Any other comments on the attendance schedule? Okay, so I think we're going to step back to elections.
Sure, I'll handle it. So do we have any nominations to start with for the chair position?
So this is Jay Collins. I'd like to nominate Jeff Sims.
Jeff Sims is nominated. Are there any other nominations?
Come on, speak up. Mike's on.
Anybody online? Hearing none. All in favor? I don't believe we need a second.
I think you have to ask though, Jeff, do you want to be nominated?
Will you accept?
Sorry.
That's true. I know that you can also, if somebody nominated, can decline. But I'm willing to continue to do it. So I think if we don't have to vote, if there's no other candidates.
That is correct. If there's no second needed and no vote required, if no other candidates are there.
All right.
Fantastic. Mr. Sims is reelected as chair. No opposition. As Vice Chair, Mr. Williams is the current Vice Chair. Are there any nominations for the Vice Chair? Mr. Williams is nominated again. Are there any other nominations? Mr. Williams, will you accept that nomination? With no other nominations on the floor, Mike Williams is elected Vice Chair. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Collins is the current member or officer at large, rather. Are there any nominations for officer at large? Shane Collins is renominated as officer at large.
Right.
Are there any other nominations?
I just almost want to throw Malone out there. just so I can see the side owl that she just gave.
I'll be gone for several months this year, so. Just throwing that out there.
Well, hearing no other nominations, and assuming you accept, Mr. Collins, you are the officer at large again. Congratulations.
All right. Very good. Okay, next up is the 2022 State of the System report.
Can we make Vishaka the presenter, please? All right, Vishaka, we can see your presentation.
All right, thank you. I hope you can see me too. Let me get this started. Which screen do you see?
See your notes.
Okay. I'm trying to see if I can make the other screen the presentations. One second, I'm just trying to see if I can make. You can still see only the screen, right?
Yeah, I think if you do the slideshow now. Yeah.
If I do the slideshow, it's moving on to the other screen. I don't know how I can make the other screen the presentation screen.
Okay.
Now, can you see the screen?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon again, TAC committee. This is Vishaka Shivraman, TPO staff. I'm going to be presenting the 2022 State of the System report. Just to give you a quick idea about what this report is, this year, 2022, we decided to do a minor update. The last major update was presented early in the year back in 2022, which was for the 2 years, 2020 and 21. So this year, we just decided to highlight some of the major measures that have gone through some changes. So just to give you an update, the state of the system reports the trends of the transportation system performance in the county, including infrastructure condition, resilience, safety, travel time, reliability, and multimodal travel factors. Like I had mentioned before, the 2022 edition is just a highlight version, which gives you a quick update on the performance target setting, which we will be doing this year. This will help to get an overall idea about the system performance in the county. This is a very important report that helps the transportation professionals and the planners get an idea about which are the areas of strengths and weaknesses and where the transportation improvements are needed. This will help to also make project prioritization decision for the upcoming TIP and the long-range transportation plan. This report complies with the federally required condition management report. So to chime back on what Connor had presented earlier, because this report will report on all the transportation performance measures, we decided to show you a slide on the level of service by jurisdiction. So here it is for the state roads. We had about 430 miles of state roads which were in the TPO major network, which had a traffic count. And if you look at the chart, we will see that the vehicular miles are mostly performing at a very good level of service. However, the transit is poorly performing in most of the county. These two slides will show you similarly the level of service for some of the City of Tampa roads and the Plant City roads that had a traffic count and that were in the major network. Again, the similar trend is seen here, where the level of service for the vehicles is relatively good and the transit is very poor. Especially in Plant City, there is no transit service, so that's why it is not reported. I would also show you the next section, which are the transit performance in the county. Some of these numbers are coming from HART data, what they had provided to us. And as of the most recent update, as in November 22, this was the number that we had. We had about close to 1 million trips in November for all the HART buses and the services, with an on-time performance of streetcar having close to 100, the bus had around 72%, and paratransit had about 93% in this period. It is also seen that the average weekday bus ridership is about 30,000 trips. It is very similar to the last period which was reported. Also, another highlight that we can mention in this time period is that streetcar had a very high ridership of over 1 million riders in 2022, which is something very commendable. So this slide will help you to understand how the transit asset management targets are set, which I will be explaining in another slide towards the end. The TAM targets are reported by Hillsborough TPO in accordance to the federal mandate. And the last time it was reported was in 2020. The 2020 goal is the same as the 2022. So this is what the slide explains. Moving on to the 2022 performance slide, we just received some of this data from HART, so it's subjected to change. But as of now, the rolling stock, we can see that, which is the revenue vehicles, which includes buses and the cutaways and the various types of buses which generate a revenue. We can see that about 22% are not in a state of good repair, and non-revenue vehicles, which are the other vehicles maintained by HART, about 53% are not in state of good repair. For the facilities, we have to report the TAM targets, which confer to the Transit Economic Requirements Model term. That is a scale that is used to measure. And of all the facilities that have been assessed, about 23% are not in a state of good repair. The next section will highlight some of the numbers on safety. If you remember, you would probably know that 2022 was a much better year for safety. We did have fatalities drop nearly 25% compared to 2021, but that number was significantly higher in 2021 compared to. So we can see that when we did a forecast, again, at the time this report was prepared, we had close to end of 2022 numbers, but they are subject to change. So as of the data that we had, the forecasted numbers does meet the statewide targets that we have currently set. This will also undergo an update in this year. So this is what the slide that I would like to show you to explain how this the state of the system report will help with the performance target setting. As I had mentioned before, some of the numbers that we see this year have been currently are very different than the previous years. So according to the FHWA and the FDA guidelines, the TPO has to update the following factors this year. It will go to the board for adoption, the safety target being in February, greenhouse gas emissions tentatively in March, the good repair and travel time reliability in April, and the TAM targets in May. So these are currently some of the tentative dates for the adoption. With this, I will take any questions or comments for discussion at this time.
Okay, thank you, Vishaka. Do we have quite a bit of interesting data there? So is there any questions or comments? I mean, I'm not knowing, I think it's, I have to say this properly. I mean, it's great that we're 25% less deaths in this year, but it makes me wonder why there were so many in 2021. I know there's been kind of some theories and, you know, working from home and congestion on the roads and so forth, and whether that changed it, but I'd be curious to see, you know, we can continue to drive that number down going forward. You know, I know there's certainly the effort from DPO to safety is priority. You know, that 2021 is an outlier for sure. Hopefully it's an outlier. And again, it's great that we trended in a positive direction. So just wondering about that. And also that the streetcar is, you know, I think it had a, you know, one person's opinion, it kind of lulled there for quite a while, but it's starting to pick up as the downtown's being revitalized and so forth. And I think it's, you know, proven its value now. And again, that's my opinion. Just, but you know, I think that provides evidence that it's happening. So hopefully
and to back up that statement, Jeff, from what you were talking about earlier with Connor, when you were talking about level of service A or B. Well, in 2021, a lot of our roads by default became level of service A because nobody was driving. You can see what happens.
Good point. Okay, so we'll look forward to future updates with this, but you know, thank you, Vishaka. I don't think we have any more questions or comments, and there's no action to take on it. So thank you, Vishaka.
Thank you.
Would you make the podium the presenter, please?
Okay, as Wade is setting up, just announced the last scheduled topic, the functional classification workshop.
Great. Well, I am going to start this off, and then Elizabeth will be taking over for a second. But this is, thank you all for participating in this. With the local functional classification coming through sort of right now and kicking off the update of the federal functional classification, we thought this would be a good opportunity to hold a little workshop and discussion on the basics of functional classification, putting the fun in fun class. So a big part of this is access versus mobility, and along with that, speed versus safety. On the far left here in this picture, you can see a roadway with a lot of access, with a bi-directional turn lane median or a middle bi-directional turn lane, and a lot of driveways. And that slide also shows the conflict points, rather, that a roadway like that, which is geared much more towards access, can create. The roadway to the right of that, which has a fully closed median, fewer driveways, and then ultimately fewer conflict points, is more of a roadway designed for mobility. The roadway on the right also allows for greater speeds and possibly greater safety by reducing those conflict points, but speed and safety are not necessarily going together, but that is an example there. These roadway type differentiation, also they're including, context and livability into those. So the context of the roadway, all other things being equal in terms of volume, speed, that can influence whether it is maybe more, it is better for it to be a collector or more of an arterial defined roadway, and take some cues for that. Just to go over briefly the federal process here. You start with all roads, you work your way down to whether it is an arterial or non-arterial based on the context of the roadway, the volume, whether it is a more neighborhood roadway or more mobility connecting roadway. And then work your way down through that choice matrix to whether it has a controlled median or uncontrolled, whether it is limited access or not, to determine what roadway type you get to. So with that as an introduction, I will turn it over to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Wade. Hi, Elizabeth Watkins, TPO staff, and I'll talk about the federal functional classification. And I have a little bit of a different lens through all of this because prior to joining the TPO, I worked for the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Aid Office, working really closely with the state DOTs, the MPOs, and the locals. So one thing I really want to hit home is, sure, in the title it says federal functional class, but it isn't just something that's like housed up in DC and it's something there's like the feds deal with. It is very much a partnership from the locals to the MPOs to the state DOTs to that division Federal Aid Office. So as you can see on this slide, there are 7 major functional classification types: interstates, group of arterials, 2 types of collectors, and a local. But federal highway has 2 distinctions, whether it's urban interstate or if it's rural, for example, interstate. So ultimately there are 14 different combinations that can make up a functional classification, but really it's those 7 primary categories. And like Wade mentioned, at the core of functional classification is that perennial concept of how much access do you have and how much mobility do you have. But some additional factors that are used in federal functional classification is in this summary table right here. The connectivity of the network, how many access points, what's the speed design, what's some of the geometries, what's that significance. And one thing I like about this table is I think it illustrates that functional class is both an art and a science. Like, sure, you can get your AADTs and your speeds and figure out where it should be, but there's also other less, definitive things like what's your future land use going to be, what kind of populations are you serving? So I think that's one fun thing about functional classes. It's not just one answer is the right. It often promotes a lot of discussion when this happens, like Wade mentioned, every 10 years. I also wanted to talk just briefly about that urban versus rural designation. So as you may know, the US Census Bureau delineates urbanized areas every 10 years, but the Census Bureau has a very different use for that definition, that determination than US DOT. The US Census Bureau uses it for statistical analysis, while DOT uses it mostly for transportation planning purposes. So often, communities will choose to smooth or adjust those census designated urbanized areas for transportation planning purposes. And in federal law, you have about a year to do that. So that will be coming to us in about in a couple minutes. So this slide shows, based on the 2010 urbanized area, in blue is what the census designated, and then in green is what the local communities and the state DOT decided should be that FHWA adjusted urbanized area for, again, transportation planning purposes. You may be familiar that just a couple weeks ago, the census did release their 2020 urbanized areas, but it was in tabular format. So we don't have the shape files of those boundaries just quite yet, but wanted to put that out there for your information that the Tampa St. Pete urbanized area increased as we could expect, both in population and a bit in land area, but we expect to have those boundaries sometime in January. So these next few slides will just talk about, okay, we have this system, how are we using it, specifically from that federal perspective. So one of the primary reasons is to determine eligibility on federal aid projects. So if a project is proposed to use federal funds on a local road, either if it's urban or rural, that would make it ineligible for certain programs like the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program or the Highway Information Priorities Program and a few others, as well as if it's a rural minor collector. So that's one kind of immediate check mark or check that FHWA does when approving projects. In the past, it's really been used to inform some federal guidance design criteria, you know, for example, in the AASHTO Green Book or in NUTCD. It's less so these days just because it's recognized that we need more flexibility and more context-sensitive solutions. But in the past, there used to be more stringent guidelines on what does a principal arterial look like. It should be this lane width or have these design criteria. So it's less so today, but you can still find it in the design and design manuals. Another way that functional classification is used at the federal level is through data reporting, specifically through the Highway Performance Monitoring System. Every year, the state DOT submits data to Federal Highway to report to Congress, and for like principal arterials, they have to report, you know, at least 70% of the lane miles for like pavement condition and travel and traffic and all different measures. So that what the designations that are made ultimately influence what has to get reported on which facilities. And that information is used by a lot of planning agencies, but also, again, it goes to Congress annually. And historically, less so today, Congress has used those data points and used it to formulate the funding calculations in certain transportation authorization bills. So it's really, really important, you know, that data that's submitted. And then lastly, functional classification is really used sometimes to just kind of tier certain requirements. So one example are federal performance measures that, you know, came out a couple years ago, like for safety for PM1, all public roadways regardless of classification, but PM2 for asset management and travel time, that's only for the interstate and NHS, which is some principal arterials. So it kind of informs certain requirements. It's a way to easily see the transportation system and figure out, you know, what certain requirements might be necessary. And then also it hasn't in the past informed certain other classification systems that Congress decides to make up. MAP 21 had a requirement for the National Highway System to have other principal arterials be included in the NHS. Priority corridors use was an old program through Congress, which required different designations, and there's definitely linkages between those. So I'll pass it to Wade to talk more about functional class.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Just a little more on process. Looking at the 2010 to 2013 process, which was the last update after the 2010 census, it's pretty straightforward, but on the right of this, you can see that there is well, you probably can't see it, but the chair of the TPO signs, the FDOT district secretary signs, and then FHWA signs. So there is a process for now TPO approval, FDOT district approval, and FHWA. There was another version of this map, interestingly, because our urbanized boundary crosses two districts into Polk County and District 1 there. There's another one with signature blocks for District 1 and Polk County as well, which I thought was interesting. In coordination with FDOT, they've told us that, of course, the area boundaries were released December 29th. Well, the numbers were released. We haven't actually seen the boundaries, but we're looking forward to seeing that. The District 7 team responsible for adjusting those boundaries, they think it's going to be about a 12-month process. They will be, of course, bringing it back to the MPO, TPO committees and board, but that should be sort of the end of this year, probably, for comments. That will be followed by a review of current and proposed federal functional classification to determine where changes are necessary. And part of that will look at any changes that have been made at the local level to try and be consistent. Anyway, the whole process is meant to take up to 2 years in total. So we could be here in 2025 seeing the last bit of this. So talking about local functional classification uses, it can help inform roadway design based on the context. Hillsborough County, for example, has gone through a great context update and is using that in a number of ways. I'm assuming that this is one of them. And assisting in how we prioritize our roadway improvements for safety, for resurfacing schedule, for speed management. Particularly as it relates to resurfacing, obviously your classified roadways, which are higher volume and higher capacity, probably are going to have a higher need for resurfacing and other improvements over time. So just one example. This is the currently adopted 2022 map. I used it just because the colors stand out a little bit better. The green is the locally classified roadways. The red is the state classified roads. Principal arterial are red and arterial are orange. But those are the big state roadway system. And then you work your way into the blue county arterials and then green county collectors. All other roadways not shown there, of which there are many, are local roadways that are managed by each jurisdiction: City of Tampa, Plant City, Temple Terrace, and Hillsborough County. So the county's analysis used a combination of the three main approaches: a statistical approach looking at the number of a number of different data factors on those roadways, the FHWA flowchart approach, which I spoke to earlier, and a geospatial analysis approach, which uses basically GIS to determine how far apart are these different arterials, how far apart are the collectors, and do there sort of need to be more to pick up that slack? Are we looking at sort of the spacing of that and the natural draws from generators appropriately? So that was a 5-step process. First, identified the principal and state arterials, identified county arterials and collectors, then the boundaries for all the municipalities, and manually updated or adjusted county arterials and collectors for that approach. So the last step, of course, is analysis of that process and any conclusions that could be drawn from it. And ultimately came up with a number of changes. The two of these that I want to mention first are the Citrus Park Boulevard extension and Paseo Almar, both of which are new roadways. The Citrus Park extension is coming in as none to an arterial. That does connect to the Veterans Expressway, a state principal arterial, and has a full interchange there. Paseo Almar is coming in from nothing, of course, as to a collector. It does connect to state highways and goes over, of course, I-75, and is classified as a collector. My feeling, knowing both of those new roadways, is that those two distinctions or those two different classifications make a lot of sense. On Paseo Almar, I see more stop signs, more access. On Citrus Park Boulevard, I see a lot of wetlands, at least in certain areas. I see a lot fewer access points to neighborhoods. So those two made a lot of sense as new additions to the map. 22nd Street, which I've highlighted here, is a really interesting one. In the left map there, you can see that 20th Street has become the state arterial there. It did not previously exist in its current form, and 22nd Street was the arterial. The change proposed is for 22nd Street to go to a collector and 20th Street to be that state arterial. So it makes a lot of sense when you look at the aerial, as 22nd Street provides a lot of just access to those roads in Palmetto Beach. The north end of it, where it looks like it comes back into 20th Street, is actually closed, and that's a multi-use side path right there. So just a couple of examples for our thoughts here. So lastly, the MPO/TPO role in this is approval of the federal functional classification along with DOT and FHWA, and helping to align local classifications with the federal standards. So we will be coordinating between these jurisdictions over the course of the next year, and we'll be coming back in late 2023 or 2024 for your consideration. So with that, I will be passing it along to Ms. Musselman, who will be discussing the City of Tampa. And there we go.
Thanks, Wade. Hi, everyone. Jen Musselman from Kittleson here representing City of Tampa to talk a little bit about their update. So as Wade mentioned last time, Tampa's map in particular was updated, was in 2011, and they got a little bit of a head start with this and relooking at functional classification as part of the ongoing mobility plan Tampa Moves. Some of the specific city policies that are affected by functional classification include driveway spacing and placement, use of impact fees. So in addition to federal funding eligibility, impact fees can also not be applied on local streets. So that becomes an important distinction. There are some parking requirements that vary by functional classification and building setbacks. There are many other mentions in the code, but these are some of the ones that come up as the biggest policies that might be affected. For City of Tampa, they are also going through a process to incorporate a context classification for a land use classification. And so with this functional classification update, it's an opportunity to integrate both of those things to update design standards, and then a chance to make sure that they are able to apply appropriate funding to different projects, both federal and local funds. So like Wade and Elizabeth described, and I really like how Elizabeth talked about this as an art and a science, took kind of two approaches here. First was following the FHWA process to look at different data sources, where our trip generators and activity centers, everything from how you get to the airport to how you get to your local park, looking at how the system connects, where land uses are, volumes, speeds, and spacing of routes like Wade mentioned. And then kind of zooming out and taking a step back with the qualitative assessment, does this make sense? And is how our future plans going to impact the classifications, and is there anything that we want to be preparing for now and going ahead and making those changes proactively? City of Tampa used to have a little bit of a different approach to collectors. They had collectors and neighborhood collectors, and so with this update, we're proposing to update the language to bring it more consistent with how Federal Highway does it and how the county and DOT classifies their streets with major collectors and minor collectors. I want to go through a few examples. These are not all of them, but kind of hit on some of the key themes that we're seeing in the trends. And one are new streets or streets that are going to be reconnected. So this is highlighting Trask, but Rio and Occident are also going to be reconnected as part of the West Shore Interchange project. So we expect them to take on a higher function within the network and changing those from local streets to collector streets. There are also streets where we want to prioritize more of the slower speeds and safety aspects of transportation. Himes was one in particular that was driven by a resident request who was concerned about speeding through what is a very residential area of Himes. There's a lot of driveways, there's an elementary school, there's a high school right there. And so we agreed and thought it made sense to take this from a major collector to a minor collector to reinforce that speed should be slower here and really prioritize more of the access components. And then last example, and there are many of these proposed changes across the city, but looking at local streets that have a strong continuity through the network and are really serving as more of collector streets, what might have been previously considered neighborhood collectors. So these are places that are connecting residential areas, commercial areas, parks. They've been signalized over the years, which kind of naturally attracts more traffic to them. And so recognizing that higher function within the network and changing them from local to collector, even a minor collector, allows the city to put more money to these streets to help fund some of those safety treatments that might be needed to balance that increase in traffic with the slow speeds that you still want to see in the neighborhood. So our next step is very similar to what Wade mentioned. We've done a little bit of outreach so far, specifically with the development community, as this does have some minor impacts to how projects are advanced in the city. We recognize we need ongoing coordination with the county and the TPO for county roads that are within the city. And then there is an additional step for the city of Tampa that has to be approved by their leadership before it goes up to the TPO board. So I think collectively we're happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Hey, Jennifer Malone with the Planning Commission. I just wanted to point out that the city, and Jonathan knows about this, with the City of Tampa functional class changes, it's going to have a ripple effect in our plan. So right now, if you have certain residential future land use categories and you're on a collector or higher, you can be considered for non-residential uses. So anything that might be changing from a local to a collector is going to open up a lot of land use implications. But we might be changing the locational criteria through the plan update. However, I think it's going to, there's no way this is going to go ahead. So this, I think, would probably be done before we get to fixing any locational criteria in the plan update. So I just would like to continue to be involved in this conversation and taking a look at, just so we're aware of the policy implications about what's changing. Thank you.
I have a question. What happens to roadways that cross over the different jurisdictions? Like, is there kind of a merging of what the county might have designated, or do they match with what the city has on a roadway that crosses jurisdictions? That's just one of the questions. This is fascinating to me. A lot more goes into this, like Jennifer just pointed out. And can we use this to our benefit to influence a developer or to influence the design of the road to make it slower, if that's, lower the speeds, or to influence other part, of this side effect? So that first question is there coordination between county and the city? It looks like there is, at least that's on your bullet.
There needs to be, for sure. This has not been shared super broadly, so it hasn't happened yet, but my understanding is the county would be taking the lead on the county roads within the city with recommendations from the city.
That was my understanding too, is that just like state roads within the city or within the county are being designated by the state, county roads within the city or within any of the three cities, I should say, are designated by the county, but presumably with input from the jurisdictions that they run through.
Do we have any other questions or comments?
A question, if the presenter is allowed to ask a question.
You can ask yourself.
So one of the questions that came up when working on the Tampa update was what roadway network is going to be used, particularly for streets like Rio, Austin, and Trask, some of the streets downtown here. We can proactively change the pieces that exist to a higher function classification, but at what point does the full street connection get added into the map? And is that something the city needs to take the lead on, or the DOT take the lead on?
It's a great question.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Chair or Wade, could somebody repeat that question? We had a very hard time hearing that online.
That mic isn't working very well. Just try to speak up as best you can.
Or can you step back up to the podium?
Yes, so I was asking about what street network will be used for this update with some of the streets that are going to be extended or reconnected, like Trask in that example. We can change the pieces that exist today to the functional classification we want to see, but at what point does the new or proposed street connection get added into the map, and what agency should take the lead on that?
I actually do have a partial answer for that, because my understanding is that it can only be things that are fully funded that are being included in this update. So we can't, if it has to be funded for construction in the 5-year work program. And that's West Shore Interchange, right? At which I do not believe is fully funded within the 5-year work program. So we would probably not designate those through streets at this time. So that'll probably wait either as an amendment once they are completed, and I'm sort of looking at Elizabeth for some guidance on this, or like we're seeing in the 20th, 22nd Street, maybe that just waits until the 2030 census, but we can find that information out.
Are you talking about like the local functional class system or the federal functional class system?
I'm talking about streets that don't exist today,
Okay.
but are planned. And I assume they would come on as just local streets by default, but if we wanted to get them on the federal system, how would we do that?
Oh, because they're the two different. So my understanding, at least I was down in Tennessee, there's a lot of kind of deference given to locals and future development patterns. So if there's something within that work program or the SIP, the statewide transportation improvement program, then you can add it in. So wait was spot on, at least for the federal system. I'm not really sure how it's the local classification.
I'll just kind of say how we're approaching some of it when we did ours, and it comes back to Jennifer's comment about the land use implications. You just want to be wary of adding something that doesn't exist, because you could have changes. It's Sarah Caper, by the way, for the record, the Community Infrastructure Planning in Hillsborough County. The other thing I wanted to add, just for everyone's knowledge, is that the Hillsborough County local functional classification is going to be changing from a non-adopted map to an adopted map in the comprehensive plan, and I believe it has been filed for the January 6th.
Don't quote me on this, but I think that we, I think TPO are considering actually using some consultant dollars to help with the designations when we'll get all the information. And it'll be something that will be worked through this committee. We always bounce off these types of decisions, discussions with the TAC. So that would be over the next few months, maybe the next few months. Yeah.
Sorry, can you just repeat that and speak up?
I have a hard time hearing. Yes, we've been discussing, Beth and I, that we would actually be interested in using one of our consultants to help with this process. You know, your question was like, who's going to take the lead on that? Or we can be that person that sent your group there, that we can pull everyone together to come up with that. Okay.
All right, thanks, Gina. Yes, Jonathan.
Jonathan Scott from the city of Tampa. When you get that map ready to go, we can kind of get together and coordinate, you know, our streets and stuff like that. We use that map all the time, like Jennifer says. So, like the streets in the city of Tampa, we do classify those ourselves. You know, so if there's any changes, it'd be great to update all these. Get together with us.
Yeah, it sounds like I mean, I don't know much about all this, but schedule a Teams meeting with the county and the city all online and hash it out over a half hour, an hour. I think seems like what I'm gathering here is being, with more ability for people to have time to prepare for the answer. I think that's what, right now I think everybody's kind of speculating. I think if a little bit more time to talk to your comrades, you probably have more definitive answers. So that's what it sounds like. So, but I think it's.
That was the purpose today. It's just like, this is what this is, it's coming around to us. And having, a little bit about how each of the watershed. I mean, I'm still not totally clear on how it's used, like in development, use a little bit of that. But like in any other like design, I'm just very interested in if it's can influence how a roadway is designed when it's reconstructed. But it sounds like the context class application will solve any of my concerns when it comes to speed management.
All right, yes, wait.
I did have one question, and maybe Mike or Bob would note that the comments that Jennifer made about these mobility fees only being allowed to be used on city classified roadways. Is that true for the county, or is it just the mobility areas in the county that define where that money can be used?
I think the, first of all, the fees have to be spent in the zone where they're collected. Well, they have to benefit that zone. But I think they can be spent on any roadways in those areas. The only thing, don't believe they can be spent on the interstate. I think that's the only limitation.
Thank you. That helps me a lot. It was the first I'd heard about the cities, which is an interesting consideration.
Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, I think we're ready to move forward. Thanks for the presentation. So that concludes the scheduled activities. Under old business or new business, there's a reference to the notification of 2050 revenue forecast stakeholder coordination.
Yes, we are getting ready to kick off the tech memos for the long range transportation plan. And the first part of that is looking at the 2050 revenue forecasts. And we will be coordinating with our stakeholders on that, which includes all of you.
Elizabeth's the project manager for that. And again, here at the TAC, you're going to get more technical presentations on these types of things than the other committees, which kind of warning you that I think by next month.
Yeah. We'll have lots of financial data and assumptions for you to look at, and we really appreciate just your input and your professional expertise, because it's a really critical input that goes to the long range plan. What are those reasonably expected revenues? So we're looking forward to that conversation.
All right, very good. Does anybody else have any old or new business they'd like to bring up? Sounds like that's a no. So with that, I believe our next meeting should be on Monday, February 6th. So mark the calendars. And with that, I believe we are adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you. We need working. Oh, you just